Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm David and I have an apology to make. This video is one that I filmed about a year ago and for some reason didn't edit or publish, but it does have techniques in it that we're going to need in an upcoming quite large build, so I really thought you guys should see it. Let's get to it. Greebles, gribbles, gribblies and greeblies. I bet you never thought you'd hear a sentence start off like that before. Welcome back to the channel everyone. Today we are going to be revisiting polymer clay. Now, can you remember this little chap? He's changed a little bit since the first video I did on polymer clay, because we've made some additions. I'll pull up a photo now so that you can see. Back in the first video I showed you how to make a simple door. Wasn't particularly ornate, but since then we've learned a few more techniques in adding some fine detail to it. So as you can see on this one, I've added some reinforcing metal bands and some hinge plates with nails or rivets. They're nails, it's a medieval style door. And I've also used a little bit of scrap jewellery just to add a door handle to it. Why have I gone to such lengths to add detail to a simple door? Well, we are now at the stage where we're starting to add a little bit more detail to our models, and Greeblies or Greeblies is one way of doing it. Now, Hollywood uses it all the time. It's all that fine detail that you see on their models. Now, they've got unlimited budgets, so the traditional way of doing it is to go out and buy model kits and just get different parts off and disguise them as something else. And they can buy loads of model kits, but we don't have that kind of budget. So what we are going to do is we are going to use model clay to make Greeblies or Greeblies, and then we're going to make a mould so that we can make lots and lots of them. So our simple wooden door now has enough detail to be used as a master. Well, not quite. It still needs to be finished off. I've grabbed some more polymer clay. I used the same technique using a comb just to add some texture to it, and this will get cut down to become a door frame. I'll attach it all together and then we'll make a mould of that and be able to stamp out loads of them, because you always need doors, doesn't matter what building you're making. I'll quickly set the cutting mat up and I'll show you what we're going to do. So first thing we're going to do is trim that wooden beam down to size. As we showed in the first video, once it's been cured, polymer clay does cut very easily with a craft knife. Just size that up, slice, and another slice. Yep, they look okay. So what I've got is some clear plastic that's just been reclaimed from packaging, and I'm going to be using that as a backing board. What we're going to do is super glue all of our assorted Greeblies to it, and that is going to be our master sheet. Now eventually what will happen is we're going to put a undercoat to protect the Greeblies on there, and then we're going to put a coat of gloss spray on top just to give it a nice slick surface, so that when we create a mould using this as the master, then it's got that little bit of ability to release itself quite freely. Now just looking at it, I've got a little bit too much of an overhang on this side, so I'll just trim this one down. And that's all fine. We're going to move on to a sci-fi Greebly now, and it's one of those simple little pieces that is useful for pretty much any sci-fi, or even modern for that matter, piece of terrain, and that is the good old-fashioned bulkhead light. Now, what I have, and this is a public service announcement, make sure that if you've got kids doing this, you are helping them with this part, because this is the packaging for tablets. I am going to be using them as a mould because it's nice and shiny and it's the right shape that I'm after. And I've got them from two different manufacturers so that the size is ever so slightly different. So I'm going to be using part from one and part from the other just to get the shape that I'm after. What we also need and this is one that I always keep handy. It is simply water with a little bit of detergent. That was an old bottle that had been finished and used, so I filled it up with water, still got a bit of soap in there, and we are going to be using that as what is called a release agent. Certainly the stuff that I am using, Sculpey, or any of the clays, there is a good possibility that when you adhere it to another surface, it will bind or stick in some way, and then when you try and pull it apart, it's going to deform. So what you use a release agent for is basically to give a little bit of a coating to at least one of the surfaces so that when your clay pulls away, it comes off nicely. I've also got a paper towel here, and I'll show you how to do it on the smaller one. All I'm going to do is pop a bit of detergent in there, use my paper towel to soak up pretty much all of the excess. There is still a small pool of the stuff in there, so I'm going to work on the paper towel so I don't get spillage everywhere, and then get some Sculpey. Because it's a sort of cup shape that we're putting it into, what I am going to do is shape the Sculpey so that it is in all dimensions kind of thinner than what I'm putting it into, and then when I push it in, it will expand out, fill the surface, and come out cleanly. That's the plan. Good press and pull. Hopefully what you can see there is a lovely shape. Carefully trim off some of the excess, and what I probably want to do to stop it from dragging is get some of that release agent on the blade. It really does help to keep your blade wet, and then that will cut through just gently but quite nicely. Remove the excess, pop that back into place, and that one is ready to go in the oven. I'll quickly do the other one, and we'll come back to that one after it's baked, and I'll show you the assembly. Last gribbly bit for this session, another sci-fi one. This time we're going to do a door padlock. It's one of those things where it just adds that little bit of detail to the side of it. Very, very simple to make. Again, I have my baking paper already. That's the surface that I'm going to be working on, and I have my trusty block of wood so that I've got an elevated surface so that my knife blade can remain parallel when I'm doing any cuts. I've also got a beaker of soapy water there just so that I can dip the knife, and it's got that release agent. It's going to be quite a small piece, this one, so we only need a small amount of clay. Make sure it's got reasonable adhesion. First thing, use the back of the knife blade and just flatten it out. Next, we're going to construct the keypad. So for that, we need, for a standard keypad, it is 4 keys high, 3 keys wide, so we need 5 cuts horizontal, 4 vertical. The good thing about Greebly bits is because we're going to be working out how to mass produce them, you can take your time to get it just right. An evening spent making something like this, where you can then churn out hundreds of them, is hours well spent if you get it right. Again, with the knife blade, and turn it round. I'm going to shorten my blade just a little bit because it's a wee bit on the wiggly side. Alright, am I happy with that? Okay, so now that I've got the guidelines, I'm going to use something a little bit more wide. So instead of the very edge of the blade that I've been using for the cuts, I'm now going to use the end of the blade and just depress in, because when you're making a master, you want the detail emphasized ever so slightly. So that to me looks very much like I've got the keys sorted out. Now around the edges I am going to re-flatten. Just take your time, just erase those marks, because it's just the keypad that we're after at this stage. So we now have a keypad. Now the last little piece of detail that we want for this is to have either a camera or a speaker pad thing. So for that I have a pen. Now it's one of the retractable kind, and all we're going to do is make a very, very light depression, just lining it up properly, come on. And there we have a circle. Give it a little bit of a dab to get some of the excess water off. And then I could bake it like that and trim it, but waste not, want not. I will get it more down to size. I want it about there. Cut and draw away, cut and draw away, cut. Come on, draw away. Final one on the bottom there. Now I can see that there is a very small hairline crack there, so I am just going to gently smooth that over. And that is also ready to go in the oven. That wasn't so difficult, was it? Let's get these baked. We'll get them mounted and we'll make some molds, stamp molds out of them. Okay, first one out the oven is the communication door entrance thing, and it's not quite ready or not quite finished, but we will glue that part in place because there is one more bit to be added to it. You may notice the difference in colour between the two. That one I'm reasonably certain I managed to leave in the oven for just a little bit too long, but that's okay. It has still come out good enough for our purposes and we'll still be able to get a good impression from that. I want to do a little bit of addition to that. This is just some scrap polystyrene sheet. It was cut out of one of the Amira models and I just want a little bit of it. And I'm using this because it is relatively thick material, because when we press the clay down on it to make the stamp, we obviously want it to be able to withstand that force. I need a bit of a deeper cut than that. Have I got that right? Yeah, looks like I've got that right. And then I just want to score this rather than cut through it. See, I've just bent that, and the same on this side. And we have a housing for the top. That one's done. Ready to take an impression just like that one. Let's move on to those bulkhead lights. Two pieces out of the oven. Now what I want is the top part of one and the bottom part of the other. Now because the pieces are quite irregular, it's going to be a little bit difficult cutting them, so what I'm going to do to start off with is just take a slice off the side of both. Now that I've got a good deep cut, hopefully that will just snap off, which it has, and then do the same on this one. And then now that I've got that, I've actually got a flat edge in which to brace it on, so that I can make my cut to get this sort of lozenge shape things out. So that's the smaller one, that's the larger one. I want the bottom part of this one and the top part of that one. And then I'll just trim that up. That looks good. Now we don't mind too much if you have a look at it from the side. Hopefully you can see that. It doesn't matter too much that the top is not perfectly flat, because at the end of the day when we press down on it, anything that is kind of in the centre doesn't matter, and most of that is going to be covered by another piece, which we will sort out now. I want my cut about, I think, there, so that will sit on top of that as a base, and there is a rim around it. Let's get that glued in place. Yep, that looks reasonable all the way around. Okay, now we want a couple of strips of reclaimed card. That should do it. Cut that in half. A little smear of super glue. Connect that to the lip. And then bend it around. Now I'm just going to leave that one hanging there for a moment and allow it to dry while I attach the other one. Then bend that down into place, mark it, snip it, dab more glue on the very end. That's good. Same with the last one. Okay, to the metal bands that you get on bulkhead lighting. You'll remember me using this trick before. Do it on that side. I want to mark it there and there. Get it in the right place. Yeah, happy with those. Dab of glue. Line up the rivets. Have I got that straight? Yes. So there you have it. One card of Greeblies ready to go off our paint varnish, and we'll come back to it and make some stamps so you can mass produce your Greeblies. Undercoat done, varnish done, and I'm hoping that the sheen from the lights isn't messing it up, but hopefully you should be able to see that I've also taken the opportunity to draw just some guide markers, a couple of mil out from the edge of each piece, and that is so that when we make our stamp, which is the next part, because it's a little bit more expensive in terms of clays, we can quite happily cut off the excess and not sort of use a knife and bite into the Greeblies that we've just made. Quite happy with these, I'll be perfectly honest with you. Now, this is the next of the polymer clays that we are going to use. Dukit is this brand name. I have seen it called Fimo before. It is more of the one that I guess is used for kids craft. It comes in lots of nice bright colours, like plasticine does, so you can stick it all together and then just bake it and off you go. Nice robust little piece. It is a different consistency to Sculpey, which is the main clay that I use. Sculpey is a very soft clay, is very easy to work with. It's a little bit softer than plasticine, I would say, but obviously can be baked hard. This is a very rigid clay. When you take it out of the packet, which I'm about to do now, because I want to use it, you can feel it almost feeling like plastic under your fingers. However, it's not the worst thing to have around, because pound for pound, it is still cheaper than perhaps the two-part epoxy clays, like Green Stuff or Milliput is the other one, or even some. I mean, you can get two-part epoxies that are used by plumbers and that kind of thing in trade shops. You can get them, but this is still cheaper by my reckoning, by weight and size, than those things. Yes, the advantage with those is that they can just air dry, but some of them do have quite a short work time with them, and there is always the possibility that you could slightly deform something, because with them being a two-part epoxy, they do heat up as you're kneading them together. So let us just grab a small amount of this. Just to be on the safe side, I will make sure that I have enough, and as you can see, I'm really having to work that. It's actually quite a mission to start getting that pliable to be able to work with it. It's not difficult stuff to work with, it's just hard work, but I do believe that I have got it now pliable enough and over the size of our bulkhead light. So that is the one that I'm going to take a mould of first. As ever, when doing this kind of thing, just a little bit of soapy water. I'm using that as a release agent. Got a good covering over there. Press down and make sure that it's in. Just using the guidelines, because this is a little bit more expensive, I'll trim that off, and it already feels as if it is releasing, and if I lift that up, that looks like a reasonably good imprint. Because I've already got it off, I'm not going to bother trimming that bit. I will accept that as a casualty of war. I will get on and I will do the imprint for the keypad, and then I will show you, because it may be a little bit different, this larger flatter door. I'll do that one on camera. So, 2 impressions done, and on to the last one. Here is hoping that I have done enough. Is that going to cover it? Yes, I believe it is. Now, this one is not going to lift off in the same way that the others did, because it is long and flat, and that is why I'm making sure that I am taking extreme precautions to get that release agent on there, because it's going to have to peel up and then be laid flat back down again. Here goes. Press down from the top. Make sure that impression is good. Press in at the sides, making sure that it has gone all the way down to that backing board. Because you see, if there are any folds, if they're at the corners, we can just trim them on the production impression. Make sure that is down all the way around. Here goes. It is actually lifting up quite easily. Run your knife around the edges, release up the last side and get your fingers under it. Come on. And yes, that does appear to be a good impression. I am happy with that. Onto the baking paper, just ease it back down into place. These two go on as well, and they can all go in the oven. It's about 30 minutes. So I'll see you shortly. So, moulds are out of the oven, and I have reattached them to their original formers so that we can check for defects, and I can see a problem. The two smaller ones fit back on perfectly. Bulkhead light is good. The door switch is good. The medieval style door has deformed. Now, this was my own fault. You can see how it is bored in the middle. Now, essentially what has happened is gravity has worked against us, and because it is such a large piece, as it has been sitting in the oven and the clay has been heating up to start to harden, the centre part has melted a little bit and sagged. Now, there's a couple of ways around this. The first way is to make sure that you use more clay so that you have a more rigid mould, and it will essentially defy gravity and everything will be fine. But that is a waste of clay. So the structurally correct way of doing it is to put essentially down the long axis kind of an arch. Now, because we're going to be using that as a stamp, that arch would also double as a handle, but an arch also makes a good bridge, and because it is joined to the bottom, that would have made it structurally good and everything would have been happy and it wouldn't have deformed. If it was me, I would almost be inclined to say, look, that is pretty much good enough at a distance, you can get away with it. But we're not going to do that, because you may be a little bit more of a perfectionist than I am, so I will show you how to hopefully rectify such things. So this is now plastic, and this technique works basically on any kind of plastic. It doesn't matter whether it is a model kit or soldiers or something like that that have deformed or bent or that kind of thing. Maybe it's not come out of the mould correctly, and you need to just tweak them back into shape. So, works on any plastic, but parental warning, do not let your kids do this by themselves. Give them a hand with this if they are the ones that are doing the crafting. What I have is a jug of really hot water, and what we are going to do is immerse it gently to make sure that it's not splashing everywhere, and we are going to leave that in there for about 5-10 minutes just to allow the plastic to soften, become a little bit more malleable, and then we should be able to work it back into shape, get rid of that defect, and as soon as that's done, we put it into a cold plunge pool to harden it. That's the plan. Let's see if it works. Oh, one thing I should have said. For anyone thinking that it would be a good idea to prop up the inside of your mould using something, you know, so that it doesn't sag, it's being held up, not the best idea, because at the end of the day, anything that you do use to prop it up, your mould is going to take on the impression of whatever that material is, and of course there you're going to lose detail. So strengthen it from the outside or sort out deformities after. Now, this is the part that you've got to be careful with, because it's going to be extremely hot still. Fish that out. It's hot but not bad, but we can just press that centre part in and then into the water with it, and that has definitely straightened that kink out. Okay, there's far less of a sag there. I am far more happy with that. Excellent! Good work, team. Now, because we're mass producing them, you can essentially use any kind of material. So the cheapest stuff realistically is going to be stuff like air dry clay. You know, once it is up against another model, it's not going to be at all fragile. It's not as if you're going to be dropping it or knocking it or things like that. As long as it is protected, you know, you can go up to mass producing them with an air dry clay, and it gives them better durability. In fact, even flour and water, you know, the old flour water salt mixture that you used to play with at kindergarten, once that dries, cheap as chips. So now the acid test. Let's see whether or not we can actually make or mass produce stuff using these moulds. I'm going to go with the bulkhead light. One thing that I will say is, because this step only takes a few seconds, just take that extra time to actually help the mould out. So just a little bit of preforming of the clay, just so that it is going to fit inside and, you know, not try and trap air pockets or things like that. Get it down properly on there. Add some of the release agent. Still just soapy water. Make sure that it is all over the bottom, and we will just use some of that to add it onto the clay itself, just so that it's going to release on both sides. Get rid of the excess. Here goes. Give it a bit of a dab. And that, definitely to me, looks like one bulkhead light. Job's a good one. So there you have it. It doesn't have to be using polymer clay. You can make your Greeblies or Greeblies or whatever they call them out of spare model parts, scrap, anything. Okay, glue them all together, get them on a backboard, make a master, slap some polymer clay over the top of it, get a mould, stamp out and mass produce. You do not have to spend hundreds and thousands on model kits to get your Greeblies any longer. Hope you enjoyed this video. As ever, please do the social media thing. There are loads of options where you can like and subscribe and ring bells and follow on Twitter and Instagram and marvellous things like that. Hope you've enjoyed this one. I will see you again next time. Bye for now.